You did that so well. Thank you for leading us in that song. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. Reverend Sonya Milton is here from Napa, and we so appreciate her making the trip over today. She speaks with us too infrequently, in my opinion, but we're grateful every time that she is available and can make it over here. Also joining her husband, Reverend Hal Milton, in the back with Puppy. So we welcome the whole family here today, and please let's give a warm welcome to Reverend Sonya.
Right. I'll call, don't worry. Right? We'll have coffee. Good morning. Good morning. It's great to see that there's so many people Zooming, either from home or from the beach, the Bahamas, wherever you may be, in your pajamas. It's great. It's really nice to be here. It's always good to be here. And when we come, we always usually come over from Calistoga, so it's just a beautiful ride to drive up Valley and then come this way. Reverend Patricia told me that you're spending this month working on unity principles and the foundational aspects of unity, which are so precious. And it's so precious to have a community where we can always practice the presence anywhere we are, but when we're in community, when we're in together, when two or more are gathered, it's just so much sweeter, and we leave so much more uplifted. Even when it's not always uplifting times, we can create that upliftment within our own consciousness, our own hearts. So Reverend Patricia asked me to speak about my journey to unity, and I thought, wow. So, I've been thinking and taking notes and made an outline, and just, it helped me remember so many things, the books and the people and just my own journey. And as I wrote in my little blurb was, what's a nice Jewish girl from the Bronx doing how did she get to be a unity minister? So, I grew up in the Bronx in a very secular Jewish family where we basically practiced food and guilt. And but my mother used to say, so there's no sense of religion, but my mother used to say, it loves to happen. And that was sort of our religion. And when I think back on it, it was, I got chills now just saying that. It was like this movement of energy, of love, of God, of presence. And she grew up, sort of bohemian and, that era. And always looking at alternative things for herself. When I was about 5, I was in kindergarten. I didn't know how to read yet, and I had 2 girlfriends who went to Holy Cross. We lived in this big apartment building over there, and so I'd hang out with them after school, and they were older than me. And one day they showed me how you get on your knees, and you pray to Jesus, and you make the sign of the cross on your chest. And you do that before you go to bed. And so that night, so I got on my knees, and I mumbled, and I made the sign of the cross. Well, my father saw that, and just about, he was a very mild-mannered man. And so soon after, my mother marched me down to the local synagogue, where she'd never been, none of us had ever been, and said, take her, for Sunday school. And they said, well, she's, we usually just start the children when they begin to read, because they're reading English, then we teach them. And my mother, in her wonderful way, said, if you don't take her, the Catholic Church will. And so that began my very short tenure at the synagogue, because it got in the way, and, it wasn't convenient for them to take me every week. But the one thing that I did learn was something called the Shema. Anybody know what the Shema is? Go ahead. Okay, again, all of us together. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, which means hear. And I used to think it meant here like we're here, but it's H-E-A-R, hear. Here. So here. Thank you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, which is our first principle, right? God is everywhere present. God is the presence and the power. So for some reason, that stuck with me. So I didn't even read yet, but those words, and I found that every night in bed, I would say those words. And I believe that they made an incredible impact on my life. And I did that way into my teens even, because it's just so true. And so as a family, we were very, not a little, alternative. We used the I Ching. Familiar with the I Ching? The I Ching is a Chinese book of changes, and it's sort of divination. You throw coins or sticks, and it sort of guides you to a certain reading. What are they called? The hexagrams. And you sort of read these wonderful, energetic sort of ideas that remind us of movement and changes. It's called the Book of Changes. The I Ching is a book of changes. And we did that as a family for important events. Which, we moved a lot. Things were crazy. We ended up moving to Miami Beach and then to Miami. And so that was sort of a standard for us. My mother loved the tarot cards. She always liked something a little edgy, She liked Edgar Cayce and past lives. So I found myself reading those things. Edgar Cayce, important for anybody? At a certain time of our lives, those were wonderful readings. Edgar Cayce was a seer from Virginia, and he was able to channel something that really dealt with mostly with healing and past lives. And so that was really interesting. Phenomena was so interesting, but his healing messages were very powerful for people. And so I read a lot. I read Ouspensky. Anybody read Ouspensky? In Search of the Miraculous, and then Gurdjieff, The Fourth Way. That was so interesting to me. They were both Russian teachers. I like this. Ouspensky's, he established a theory he called eternal recurrence. We know this, don't we? In which he believed that there can be moments in time where we are trapped and forced to repeat and repeat and repeat until we learn from it, right? And Gurdjieff, who was his teacher, who, by the way, only accepted students after the age of 35. He wouldn't take anybody on who was young. He waited until, we matured and seasoned. He argued that many of the existing forms of religious and spiritual tradition on earth had lost connection with their original meaning and vitality, so could no longer serve humanity in the way that had been intended at their inception. As a result, humans were failing to realize the truth of ancient teachings and were instead becoming more and more like automations, susceptible to control from outside and increasingly capable of otherwise unthinkable acts of mass psychosis, such as World War I. And that was really their era. So there's always been those teachers for us that see beyond, which is something so comforting for us to know now, that appearances are not always how it is. Because I don't know about you, but these are challenging days, yes? Yeah. Not how we expected things to be, but all voices can be heard. It's really a time always for us to step out to those that we don't agree with and be able to listen and hold the biggest space we can. So obviously I was quite precocious, and so I set my sights on seeing the unfoldment in my life of it loves to happen, which is kind of a wonderful thing, isn't it? It's like, because that's what happens. When we get into that bigger space of ours, we see, we look at history. History is so helpful for me, how things keep changing. They go up and they go down. And this is not the first time it's been like this in our country and in the world. And it will be interesting to see how it goes as we hold our consciousness of oneness, of beingness, of the Christ within, of the Buddha within, of whatever, Krishna within. So I always knew there was something. And because I came of age, I graduated high school in 1967, and there were lots of things to explore and to partake of, and I did all of it. Anybody else do all of it? All of it? Some of us did all of it. And it took me a while to come to myself, as the prodigal son did. Remember the prodigal son? In fact, any of you in traditional Christian churches this week, the story in the lectionary is the prodigal son. So I'll just detour there for a minute. And if you recall, you may or may not know this story, and this is a parable. This isn't something that happened, it's a teaching story. And it goes quite deeper than I always thought it was, because it seemed like, oh yeah, the father, the source, he came home. So there was a man who had a great, can I move away? Is that okay with the camera? I don't have to be, although that's a nice thing to stand on. So there was the man who had the big land and everything, and he had 2 sons. And one of the sons said, I'd like to take my portion, he was the younger son, and go out and see the world. And so he went out to see the world. The elder son stayed home and worked for his father. So he went off and he lived in riotous living with prostitutes and, those are the words, those of lesser moral standards than what his father had hoped for him. And he had a really good time, and he squandered everything. And so he realized that he was willing to do whatever he had to do. So he went to work feeding pigs, a nice Jewish boy feeding pigs with these pods. And he thought, I am doing worse than the slaves that work for my father. Maybe I ought to head on home. It might be better for me. So he heads on home. His father sees him coming, runs out to meet him, and is so grateful. The son says, I have sinned. I'm sorry, I'm back, just give me something to do. Well, the father is so thrilled to see his son come back. He orders the finest robe for him and sandals on his feet and a ring on his finger. And he brings them in and get the dancing girls and kill the fatted calf, and there's a huge party. Well, older brother's over there in the fields working, and he hears this, and he goes, what? There's a party going on. I wasn't invited? So he comes back to the home, and he says, Dad, hey, I've been working my butt off for you all these years. I haven't squandered anything, and here's this guy who's like, and you give him the fatted calf? And the father says, but everything I have is yours. And he's thinking, if everything's mine, then you gave him the fatted calf. How about me getting the fatted calf and me having my friends over and me having a party? And the father says something like, yes, but he was dead, and he is now alive. You have always been here with me. So that's a nice story, and it really, I've always interpreted it like, he came back to the source, and there's always enough there. But I've been thinking about that story a little more lately. Like, was somebody playing somebody? Because, these parables of Jesus were not all about nice, nice, nice. It was deep, deep, deep. And there's a way of teaching, and this was a big part of my education. I'll mention that now, and then I'll come back to it. The Mayudic way of looking at story and looking at Scripture. Now, I'll tell you how Hal and I got to Unity, because that's a story in itself. But we were in our first semester of a two-year in-depth residential program to become ministers. It's different now. But we started in 1989, and we were ordained in 1991. So it was a while ago. It was when we couldn't wear open-toed shoes, and none of the women wore pants. I wore pants to my, Palazzo pants to my chapel service, and it was a big deal. And that was in my second. So things have changed a lot. And for me to suit up and wear, old hippie girl wearing pantyhose and skirt, so that was sort of fun, it was different. So Hal and I had been involved in the Unity Church in Santa Barbara, where we lived, and we had gone for 1 month. We were inspired. We had gotten involved. Well, the reason we got involved with Unity Church is because we rented the church to do these workshops we used to use based on personal expression, authentic expression, using the vehicle of solo stage singing. So we would get people on stage to sing. People who never sang. It wasn't about having a good voice or remembering the words. It was about just, here I am. Maybe there's tears. Maybe there's whatever it is. And it was a beautiful thing. And Hal had created that, and I got to kind of ride along and work with him. So we rented the Unity Church in Santa Barbara to do this workshop. And it ended with a public concert. We would invite the community to come for this concert. Well, the minister of the church was there, and he saw us coming. The next thing, we were in the lay ministry, I was on the board, we were just all very involved, and we'd really been ready for a spiritual community. So we go to Lee Summit, Missouri, which is outside of Kansas City, and it's like, oh, we're in the Midwest. And it was very different for us, and it was very difficult for me. When we first got involved with this Unity Church in Santa Barbara, part of the things that we did as lay ministers is come up and read the Daily Word. Well, the Daily Word had the word Jesus, the name Jesus in it. I could not say it. Even though I was secular Jewish, I couldn't. So I would just instead say love. Every time it was Jesus, I would use the word love instead. So in that first couple of months, I had a really hard time because it was a very Christian atmosphere that I did not realize I was getting into. And one of the questions we're asking now, as an aside, all of us, ministers and congregations, is Unity Christian? And some, that's a real conversation going on now. I always come back, don't worry. I'm going off, but I will bring it all back around because I do that. That's part of what I do. So there was a workshop. Alyssa Van Til. Many of you know Alyssa. At the time, she was our metaphysical Bible teacher at Unity School, and she was my savior. She had gotten involved with the Guild for Psychological Studies, which is out of San Francisco, and they have a retreat center in Middletown called Four Springs. And she had done some of the work there, and she brought a couple of the facilitators to do a workshop at a convent, actually, outside of our area in the Kansas City area. And Hal and I went to it, and the name of it was Jesus and Jung. And that was where I went, okay, I can sit in this. I see a broader picture of what, and something I just learned the last couple of weeks when I was doing some work with Unity is that Charles Fillmore really studied Carl Jung. I didn't know that. And I'm not a Jungian, but I find that really interesting. So out of that was a different way of looking at Scripture. Metaphysical is how we do it, but it's also like, how are these stories our story? How are these stories unfolding in the world today? And how are these stories our stories? And it was a bit of a shift of a way of looking at that. And that's what really got me through, and that's been a focus for me all along. I actually brought more Maiutics into the Unity ministerial training. I've taught it, and I still meet with a group weekly of mostly Episcopal and Presbyterian clergy, and we work with the lectionary, and that's why I've got the prodigal son in my mind right now. So where was I? Right. So this it loves to happen thing that I never really identified. So in a way, I was fortunate to not have a vision of God to rebel against. Bible beating to rebel against. I didn't have any of that. So I was just very open to things. Hal and I met in 1982, I think, originally. We were both involved in a little edgy spiritual group that we realized later was a cult, but it brought us together. And we left that, and when we met, we were both doing something called Rolfing. Some of you might know what that is. You don't hear that too much these days, but it's a way of working with the physical body. So he lived in LA, I lived in Miami, and we had these two things in common. We met first 1 year at this conference, spiritual conference, and then a year later, we met again at the Rolf Institute, and that's when we went, oh, there's something here. So we courted across country for a while, and I finally, was lured to California. We didn't have the humidity there that you have in Florida. Hal was not going to deal with that. So that work, the Rolf work, is really about unwrapping layers of holding patterns, whether they're emotional holding patterns, physical holding patterns, from accidents, from trauma, from your mother saying, don't touch that, don't touch that. And then the muscles here start getting tightened up. And it's a beautiful way to unwrap those layers of fascial tissue and to let you be in your full self. And so I came to it from that consciousness, and so did Hal. And so we got to do that work together as well as these workshops. And then all of a sudden we got lured, it loves to happen, right? We got to Unity Santa Barbara. And one day we had a 7 a.m. Breakfast, a lay ministry breakfast, and someone who just graduated, whose wife was still in the school, he was making the rounds and he came to talk to us. And I remember leaving that meeting. Now, we were in 2 different cars because we were doing different things. It was like 8 a.m. I remember in the parking lot saying to Hal, we should go do that. Because Hal, being the wanderlust person that he's always been, it's like, what's next? And I'm like, oh, I'm settled. Oh, he's like, what's next? Now what are we going to do? So, soon after, we went to a month of CP, which was called Continuing Education Program. This is something that Meg is involved in now. It's in a different format now. And we went for a month and went, wow, came home, sold our home in Santa Barbara, packed up a U-Haul, and drove to Lee Summit, Missouri for 2 years. And that was the culture shock in many ways, and it was a great thing. And then our next, and we made it, we got through. We graduated. We made friends. It was wonderful. Now, of course, the classes are mostly online, but there's something about 2 years of this group of 29 people together moving in the direction of becoming Unity ministers. And so we decided after, because we were so cool, because we'd come from California, and we were sort of like these old hippie bohemian people who were now into something a little more structured, so we'd be able to find people like us, and we could be their ministers, because we were so cool. So we thought, we'll go where we're needed. We ended up in Knoxville, Tennessee. Anybody been to Knoxville, Tennessee, East Tennessee? Oh, it's beautiful. And they were so grateful to have us because they were this little island in the midst of the Bible Belt. We thought we could make a huge difference in the Bible Belt because we were so cool. They wouldn't even, in the Saturday newspaper, the local newspaper, they would do free listings for churches, but they wouldn't they'd put our information in, but they wouldn't put in that we had meditations on Wednesday night. So we finally changed it to Prayer Circle, and then it was printed in the paper. So, the people involved in Unity were so used to this. We had a huge youth group, but they were afraid to ever tell their classmates they were involved in Unity because Unity was so weird, they thought. We thought, for us, Unity was like the most conservative thing we'd ever been involved in. So our community ended up being something very different than when we thought, because this was in 1992, I think we went there, 91, 92. And the AIDS epidemic was at its full. And people were coming home to die. They were coming home to Knoxville to die from the coast, from their lifestyles. And the churches, because church was very important, would let them come, but to acknowledge that they were sinners and that they were not, So our community became this place for this whole community of people that we didn't expect. And it was just absolutely glorious. Hal once led a panel for parents of gay, lesbian, I don't know all the letters. I'm not very good at all the letters, but Hal delivered Meals on Wheels because nobody else would go to some of these homes, to some of these young men. It was really something, and it was not what we expected, and it was such a blessing for us. We learned so much, and hopefully we were helpful. So then we finally limped out of there. Hal was like done. He left me there. He came back to California, then he'd come back again, then he'd leave me again, because I was going to make it work, because that's who I am, And he was like, next, So finally, I actually came out here to Four Springs, this place that Alyssa Van Til had turned me on to. I did a 3-week experience of walking the Synoptic Gospels. Now remember, we have 4 Gospels. Matthew, Luke, and Mark are from the same source. That's why they're called synoptic, which means the same. And then John, who's sort of the mystical disciple. He's the one that Charles Fillmore liked the most. You know? And so there's a publication called The Basic Records of Jesus. And what it does is it has the, have you ever seen a parallel gospel, anybody? I'm kind of getting into the weeds here a little bit, but it's the three synoptics side by side and how they're, what's the same, because their sources are different. I think I'll get into that with you another time. I am coming back then. Reverend Patricia got a hold of me the other day at the right moment, and I'll be back next month as well, and then in August and September on the fourth Sundays. So I'll bring some of that, because I love that. That stuff's so interesting to me. How did all this happen? It was not the way the way it is now is not the way it began, but nothing is. So I went to this 17-day experience, beginning with the birth to the crucifixion, in a very experiential way, in a very Jungian way, using art and drama and music and meditation and hiking and experiencing the story. And that changed my life again. And I went home because Hal had been holding the fort for me. Even though he left, he came back. And I said, I'm ready. We either have to change everything or leave. And he was like, all right. We sold our home, bought a camper, put everything in storage, and started wandering. And ended up around here because the minister in Napa needed some, anyway. We ended up here, and we've been here 29 years, I realize. So it loves to happen, doesn't it? I mean, we stay out of our own way enough because we can't make it happen. You know, how many disappointments have we had from making it happen, trying to make it happen, make it work. I'm going to make it work. And instead, it loves to happen, and we allow it to happen. So how do we deal with these times now, which is not what we expected at this time of our lives? We're not young people dealing with what young people deal with. We didn't grow up with the internet, some of us, the internet and AI. And so how do we hold the presence? Right after the election, James Carville, who had been a supporter and a helper to Bill Clinton, you know, kind of a famous Democratic spokesperson, he said, turn over and play dead for a while. And I mean, there's something to that, you know, to just like gather your resources, hold them close, don't freak out. Because, you know, meditation isn't about sitting in bliss. If it is for any of you, how did you do it? But it's about being present with what is. And so right now, we're in meditation because we are present with what is. And so with that, let's go ahead into our time of meditation. I want us to do a meta meditation this morning. I think it'd be helpful for all of us, or maybe especially for me, because, you know, I get to stand up here. So those of you who have been here with Unity for a long time, most of you I know you have, and some of you are new here, but all of us know what it's like to go within, to become still. And I invite you now, if it's comfortable for you, to allow your eyes to close. And settle into the chair beneath you, which is supporting you. Perhaps if you have something in your hands, you can put that aside. Maybe if your legs are crossed, you can uncross them and just be open and receptive to what is right here and right now. It's such an important aspect of our teachings, our Unity teachings and practice involves our prayer and healing work. So we begin with ourselves. If any of you read the daily word this morning, the word is forgive. And so as you continue to settle into your body, see the awareness that you are here surrounded and filled and protected by light and love, by this incredible, long-lasting unity, community that spreads all over the world. And we know that affirmative prayer affirms the wholeness of all life. And so allow yourself to bring forth that healing and wholeness from within, knowing that healing comes in all forms. Sometimes it's an emotional healing, and sometimes a physical healing, spiritual healing. So this morning, we'll use this power of prayer in a metta practice, metta being loving kindness. It's a beautiful support for unity awareness practices. And in this practice, we recite specific words and phrases evoking a boundless, warm-hearted feeling. And so as you're at one with your breath and your body in this room, allow yourself, if you can, to let go of concerns or preoccupations of what happened earlier and what's going to happen later. It's the only way, is to be here now. And the inflow and the outflow of the breath is such a wonderful way to be in this moment. So if you can, be aware of this breath moving through the center of your chest to this center of where your physical heart, your spiritual heart resides. And this metta practice is first towards ourselves, because often we have difficulty loving others without first loving, forgiving ourselves. And so in this quiet space with this beautiful music in the background, I invite you to mentally repeat slowly and steadily the following phrase to yourself. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be safe. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be safe. May I be peaceful and at ease. Allow yourself to sink into the intentions they express. You might want to hold an image of yourself in your mind's eye. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be safe. May I be peaceful and at ease. Now I invite you to bring to mind someone in your life you deeply care about. Someone that when they come to mind, your heart brims with joy and loving. And slowly repeat these phrases of love and kindness towards this person or persons. May you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe. May you be peaceful and at ease. And as these feelings of love and kindness arise, connect the feelings to the phrases so that the feelings become even stronger. May you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe, and may you be peaceful and at ease. And now, allow someone you have difficulty with come to mind, someone challenging for you to be in relationship with, whether it's someone close in your life, a public figure, a particular group. And allow your heart to continue to be open as you silently say, may you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe. May you be peaceful and at ease. And sometimes during this phase of the metta, you might experience opposite feelings, grief or anger, sadness. But these are signs that your heart is softening, revealing what is held there. And you can use what Charles Fillmore called the pivotal nature of mind. You can turn your attention toward whatever patience and acceptance and kindness you muster. And so, again, you repeat to yourself, may you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe. May you be peaceful and at ease. And as we begin to bring this time of meditation to a close, I'm going to share a poem by Donna Markova called The Choice to Live or Unlive Our Lives. I will not live an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me, to make me less afraid, more accessible, to loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance, to live so that which came to me as seed goes to the next as blossom, and that which came to me as blossom goes on as fruit. And so in a few moments, as we open our eyes and we turn our attention to what's next, we're still right here, right now. Hearts open, spirits soaring, love abounding. And we say, thank you, sweet Spirit, for it truly loves to happen. And we say amen and amen as we allow our eyes to open, to maybe have a glance around the room of the loving spirits who are here, and to know that truly in God mind, all is well. Oh.